You know when you go to your favorite chain restaurant, ever stop and wonder who's really in the kitchen? Not the chef, not the manager, but the investor you'd never expect. Because behind your favorite meals, there's a quiet revolution, and it's completely changing the business of food.
You know when you go to your favorite chain restaurant, ever stop and wonder who's actually in the kitchen? Not the chef. Who's really calling the shots? Well, more and more, it's an investor you would never expect. And today, we're going to dig into how this surprising ingredient is completely changing the business of the food we all eat.
So, let's kick things off with a simple question. How much money does your favorite taco spot actually make? Well, the answer is, it depends. A lot. The financial gap between a little food truck and a fancy fine dining restaurant is absolutely massive.
All right, so at the lower end of the scale, a food truck might pull in around $10,000 a month.
Then you step it up to a popular fast casual joint, which can easily clear $50,000.
And a high-end white tablecloth kind of place, they can rake in over $400,000 a month. So yeah, there's clearly a ton of money to be made. But for most restaurants, it's a very, very different story.
That's the potential, the dream. The reality, though, especially right now in 2025, is this massive financial pressure cooker that we're calling the restaurant squeeze.
Let's just break this down. Since 2020, food costs have gone up by a staggering 29%. At the exact same time, labor costs are climbing, thanks to a tight job market and minimum wage hikes. And the result of all this? The average profit margin has been squeezed down to less than 10%. That is razor thin. There's almost no room to breathe.
And believe me, this squeeze is very, very real. We're seeing established chains, brands we've known for years, like On the Border, actually filing for bankruptcy. It is a brutal environment out there. Which brings us to a huge, kind of baffling question. If the industry is this tough, if even big, established brands are failing, why in the world would anyone be buying these restaurant chains? It just seems to make absolutely no sense.
The answer is a type of investor you might not expect at all. We're talking about private equity.
And these are not small fish. Private equity firms, which are basically these giant investment funds that buy and manage companies, are on an absolute shopping spree. Rourke Capital bought Subway for nearly $10 billion. Blackstone invested in Jersey Mike's. These are massive deals that are completely reshaping the entire industry.
So what do these firms actually do once they take over? The common idea is that they're just financial wizards, but the truth is they're much more hands-on than you'd think. You know the stereotype, right? They're financial engineers, people who just shuffle money around, load a company with debt, slash costs, and then sell it for a quick profit. But a major academic study found something completely different. They often act more like active operators, meaning they get deep into the weeds of actually running the business.
And here's the proof. Researchers Shai Bernstein and Albert Sheen did this incredible deep dive into 101 private equity buyouts. They sifted through a decade of health inspection reports from over 50,000 restaurants in Florida to get a real backstage look at what truly changes after a PE firm takes the keys.
So first, let's tackle that stereotype head-on. The study did find some evidence for it. For instance, after a PE buyout, the average number of employees per restaurant does go down. So that cost-cutting perception isn't totally wrong. But, and this is a huge but, that's not the whole story.
Because here is the twist. The study found something nobody saw coming. After a private equity takeover, the number of critical health violations, we're talking the really serious stuff, actually dropped by 16%. So wait, how is that even possible? How can you cut staff and make kitchens cleaner at the same time?
So were these PE firms just getting lucky, buying restaurants that were already getting better? Or were they actually the cause of the change? The way the researchers figured this out is pretty brilliant.
They used a natural experiment that's already built into the restaurant industry itself, the franchise model. Within a single chain, let's say Burger King, you have two types of stores. Some are owned directly by the parent company, and others are run by independent franchisees. They're basically identical twins, just with different parents making the day-to-day decisions. So when a private equity firm buys a chain like Burger King, they get direct hands-on control over all the company-owned stores. But for the franchisee-owned stores, their influence is pretty limited by a contract. This creates a perfect little experiment to see if PE management is the real reason for the changes. And the results were crystal clear. The study concluded, and I'm quoting here, that health and maintenance improvements are concentrated among those stores over which private equity exerts direct control. This is the smoking gun. It proves that these PE firms aren't just cutting checks, they're actively improving operations, and that's leading to cleaner, safer restaurants.
Okay, so we've looked at the data, we've seen the clever experiment, but what does any of this mean for you the next time you're trying to decide where to eat?
It really boils down to a fascinating trade-off. The data shows that after a PE buyout, you're more likely to get a cleaner kitchen and better food safety. Awesome. The study also found that menu prices actually tend to go down relative to competitors as all those new efficiencies are passed on to you. But the flip side of that coin, those efficiency gains often come from operating with fewer employees in each store.
So the next time you walk into a chain restaurant, it's worth asking yourself, is this a family of franchisees, a big publicly traded corporation, or is it a private equity firm quietly improving operations from behind the scenes? The answer is changing the food you eat in ways you never would have expected.
So, the next time you're biting into that burger or sipping your latte, remember, it might not be the chef running the kitchen. It might be Wall Street. So what does this mean for you? The data reveals a fascinating trade-off.